How's it going, folks? This is Mike back for a little bit of an update on some of the things that I've been watching, picking up various places like Barnes & Noble, Criterion sale, some of the things I get from Big Lots, and a few others. And I wanted to start out by showing that I'm still stuck in Halloween. One of the things that I wanted to do for Halloween was to do some reading for, some seasonal reading. So I started reading Dracula about a week before the eve of All Hallows, and I have about 20 pages left. You can see where my bookmark is here. 20 pages left. Yeah, I never read this before. Thoroughly enjoying this. It's really wonderful. Of course, there are about 4,000 different editions of Dracula. This is from Fall River, and it's really nice because it's got some nice artwork on the inside. And what's really cool about it is all of the chapter headings and the page numbers are in red, which I think is kind of a nice touch. So yeah, I've never read Dracula before, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'll probably finish it tonight. I'm a very slow reader. One thing that's impressed me about reading this book, I thought sure that I was going to be envisioning either Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee as Dracula, and I haven't been. I'm not sure why that is exactly. Maybe because the book is just so different from any of the movies. And another thing that impressed me is the fact that the character of Dracula really is a supporting player in the book. The most important character in the book seems to be Dr. Van Helsing. He seems to be doing most of the talking, and he and all the other characters like Mina Harker and Jonathan Harker and Dr. Seward, they all talk about Dracula. They're worrying about Dracula, but Dracula doesn't show up very often. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And another thing I never realized from watching any of the films is that the character of Dr. Van Helsing is a very serious, devout Catholic. I don't think that's ever been brought out in any of the films unless I just missed it. So it's just kind of cool. He not only uses the symbol of the cross, and usually with him it's the crucifix. Sometimes it's even called a rosary. But he also uses the consecrated bread, the sacred host consecrated in the Mass, to ward off vampires. And he takes particles of what in the book is usually called the wafer, and he puts it inside Dracula's coffins to make sure that Dracula and the other vampires can't come back into the coffin. So that's kind of interesting that they use that strong Catholic symbolism in this book. I think one of the characters early in the book, I believe it was Lucy, she was saying that the symbol of the crucifix was for her as an English churchwoman, meaning Anglican, Protestant. She looked upon it as being superstitious, and she was reluctant to go along with using it or having it. But as the book goes on, it seems like all of these characters, who are presumably all Anglicans, they seem to have no problem following Dr. Van Helsing's teachings about how to use these things to ward off vampires. So I thought that was kind of cool. Something I wasn't expecting. So. And I have to wonder why they didn't bring that out in the films, but then that's for the producers and the directors to decide. Another reading project I had during Halloween, I read The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, which of course is the source material for one of the best Gothic horror films ever made, The Innocents, 1961, Deborah Kerr. First it was a stage play called The Innocents, then it was made into a film. And it took me a while to read this, a little longer than I thought, even though it's really a very short novel. But Henry James's writing is kind of difficult for me. My only other experience of reading Henry James before this was to read The Portrait of a Lady, which I liked very much, but it took me a long time to read it. And Henry James is one of these writers where I need to have a dictionary on the table at all times, and I also keep my little 3x5 index cards inside the book or on the table so I can copy down words that I don't know. But yeah, I did like this. I was a little bit disappointed. I was expecting it to be as terrifying and as atmospheric as the film, and for me it was not. It was still a very good novel, and it was very much expanded for, I guess, the play and certainly for the screen. The atmosphere, certainly the acting by Deborah Carr, it made it into something that I'm not sure Henry James was able to accomplish in the book. But it is a very creepy story, and I'm very glad that I read it. I actually have 2 copies of this for some reason. I bought this many, many years ago. This is a book of short stories by Henry James, and The Turn of the Screw is included. And I think I bought this because the printing is larger, and I had less trouble seeing it. So, okay, now to some of the movies that I've been watching and collecting lately. Some I've watched, some I haven't. Still speaking of Halloween, I sent away for this A History of Horror, parts 1, 2, and 3. A couple of videos ago, I talked about one of these documentaries by the BBC's Mark Gatiss, or is it Mark Gatiss? I'm not sure. That might be the correct way to spell it. It was called Horror Europa, where he talked about films from Italy and France. And this one was produced before that. This takes care of Hammer films and some of the American films as well. And this is really cool. 3 parts to it. They interview a lot of people. They do interview Barbara Steele, and they have a lot of footage on Peter Cushing, which is really nice, dedicated to that great actor. And one of the extra features on this disc. There are 2 extra features on 2 disc set actually. Okay, so on one you have volumes 1 and 2 of the History of Horror. They are called Frankenstein Goes to Hollywood, which covers the Universal films, and then Home Counties Horror, which is the English Hammer films, and then they go into the Italian horror films as well. And volume 3 has the American Scream, which talks about modern American horror films like Halloween, the slasher films. And the bonus on here, they include the movie Freaks from 1932, which is a very strange thing to have on here. But yeah, it's kind of, I already have a copy of that, but it's an interesting thing to include on here. The other extra feature is the theatrical trailer for a really wonderful schlock horror film called The Horror of Party Beach, which is great fun. Okay, so the Criterions that I picked up a couple of days ago, I picked up a film noir called Ride the Pink Horse from 1947. This is directed by and starring Robert Montgomery. Very interesting film. I did watch it, and I'm very glad that I got this in the month of Noir-November. I also picked up this collection of 2 westerns by a guy named Monte Hellman from the 1960s, The Shooting and Ride in the Whirlwind. Haven't watched these yet. It's got actors like, well, Jack Nicholson is in both of these films. He was very young. These were made in 1966, back-to-back, on location out in Utah. Will Hutchins is in it. George Montgomery is in the second film. Warren Oates. The first film has Will Hutchins, Jack Nicholson, Warren Oates, Millie Perkins. Second film, Ride in the Whirlwind, has George Montgomery, Jack Nicholson, and Millie Perkins. Roger Corman was one of the producers of the film. Jack Nicholson was one of the producers. He also wrote the second film. So I'm very glad that I got these. I read about these a while ago. Didn't even know they existed. Got a couple of things through the mail. For those of you who care about things like this, the Warner Archives are on sale right now. Most of them are being sold for $10 a piece. So I decided to pick up a couple of Joan Crawford films. One is called Chained from, I think, the year 1934, co-starring Clark Gable. Haven't watched this yet. And one that I did watch is a silent film called Our Dancing Daughters from 1928, 29. Joan Crawford, this is the one that arguably could be the film that made her a star. She had been working in film since 1925, slowly building up a reputation and making a lot of different kinds of films. But this is the one that made her a star. She was a flapper, does a wild Charleston, and looks beautiful. It's really a very cool film. So I've decided that my next obsessive collecting goal is Joan Crawford. So, which should make Betty Davis happy. Also through the mail, I found this on sale. Never seen it before. Intolerance, D.W. Griffith, 1916, which is his follow-up to The Birth of a Nation. And I think this is something like 4 hours long. So I have to have a lot of coffee before I sit down to watch that one. Some of the things I've been picking up at Big Lots on Blu-ray. Here's a film called In Old Arizona, which is from 1929. It's one of I think it was one of the first talking westerns, and the first western that was ever, or the first talking film ever made outdoors, and it won Best Actor for Warner Baxter, 1929, playing the Cisco Kid, which is the central character in this. And I've never seen this before. I was really surprised to find this in Big Lots. Here's a film I never heard of called Limitless, starring Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro. Know nothing about it, but I thought I wasn't going to pass that up. Here's a film I've never seen, but I saw the previews. Eye in the Sky, starring Helen Mirren, Alan Rickman, and somebody else whose name I can't read. But yeah, this looks like a really good, well-made, very Aaron Paul, Eye in the Sky. I saw the previews to this a couple of times at the show, and I thought it looked terrific, but I never went to see it. I also picked up this nice little digibook, Son of God, which I've heard of, but I never saw it. And this has both the DVD and the Blu-ray and the digital copy, just everything you can possibly want. Okay, nice little book. Some of the things I picked up at Big Lots for $3 or $5. Here's a Gary Cooper film I've never heard of called Casanova Brown. Gary Cooper and Teresa Wright from 1944. Never even heard the title. So does anybody know about this? But Gary Cooper's a cool guy. Here's I picked up a copy of Michael Clayton with George Clooney and Tilda Swinton and Tom Wilkinson, which is really, really a good movie. And I'm glad to have a copy of that finally. And I watched this last night. This is a Tom Cruise film from the 1990s that I never saw before called The Firm. And I just picked it up out of idle curiosity. I kind of like Tom Cruise, but I was never that big of a fan. I watched this last night. It was absolutely fantastic. I had a great time watching this. And I think it's time for me to start exploring the works of Tom Cruise. And I've been talking for 12 minutes, so I'm done. Have fun and make comments.